You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is Jim Boston, author of Breaking News, A Story of the Fifth Estate, which is his first novel. Jim has spent his professional career in the television industry, where he eventually became the director of engineering at two broadcast companies. Jim, thanks for joining us today.
Well, Matt, Leah, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
You're quite welcome.
Well, Jim, so you worked at TV stations and then you wrote a novel about TV stations. Are any of the characters based on real people?
Yes, they are. The names have all been changed, but a number of them, yes, are based on, and some of them are compilations of personalities. So yes, the answer is yes.
Did you know right away whose personalities you were going to put together into one character, or did it take you time to
develop
think
them?
Yeah.
Well, first off, this is not my first book. I published a number of books. Actually, I did one through McGraw-Hill, the DTV Survival Guide.
Wonderful.
A long time ago. And I also wrote two books on, a first and second edition of how they do remote television production. It's entitled TV on Wheels.
Oh, great. Were those textbooks?
Well, the first one, the first TV on Wheels edition was actually a celebration of the industry. It was a coffee. They're both coffee table books. They're high-end, hardbound, glossy books. The second one is more technical than the first one. The first one, probably the best compliment I got when we wrote, and I wrote it with a co-author, a fellow up the road from where you folks are in Pittsburgh, George Hoover. And believe it or not, the largest television production company in the world is based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that's NEP.
Sure,
you probably have heard of them. Yeah.
Sure, I've seen their trucks on the road.
And George, the co-author, he's retired now. He was the chief technology officer of NEP. And he always wanted to see a book written on the industry. And I grew up in that industry and always had an interest in fact, my writing career started at Sony, where I wrote technical articles.
Oh, okay.
The magazine I wrote for, Broadcast Engineering Magazine, they had a crisis one month where an article that should have shown up did not show up, and they turned to me and asked me if I could do something over the weekend.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and so I just sat down and wrote, I thought, what was the biggest fluff piece they're ever going to see, and I just wrote the history of doing television on location. I wasn't very proud of it, but I turned it in on time. It ended up, they came back and said, anything they have ever written since they started in the early 60s, that article garnered the most response.
Wow, that's very impressive.
And so I thought someday I want to turn it into a book. And so I ran into George working on a project, and the whole book idea got hatched.
Well, that's cool. So then you, since it's a coffee table book, it's a lot of photographs. So did you take the photographs,
Yes.
or did you just ask friends in the industry to contribute?
Yes to all of the above. Throughout my career, I always took photos. But when I got serious about writing the book, I actually made a couple weeks-long forays out across the country and into Canada, and gathered photos, gathered material, and took photos. And then once this got going, it took on a life of its own, and I had stuff just showing up in the mail.
Oh, that's nice. So then your new book is called Breaking News, and that's a novel. So it's
Yes.
completely different than writing technical papers or writing a coffee book table, I would imagine.
And it was a learning experience, having never written a novel before. Actually, the first 5 chapters got rewritten 3 times as I went through and I wrote it in linear order, start to finish.
And then rewriting them, was that because the way you read it and you thought that it needed to be redone, or because an editor read it and said, let's change that?
Yes, to both. You could obviously see as we went through the book, I was learning how to write a novel. And there's something, and I'm sure you both know this, but I'll just repeat it. There's something they always tell you, fiction writers, show, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
Tell is when you just lay a load of facts on them. And showing is where you unveil the personalities and the conflict through dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And so I was very dialogue poor in the first few chapters. And I'm told that that's often normal because you have to build a universe that you're going to be in.
Sure. So was that the biggest lesson you learned from writing a novel?
Yes. The thing is once I understood the process, it became a lot easier to develop characters. There's two trains of thought, and you've got the Stephen King approach where he just sits down and he kind of comes out with an outline and he just writes it. Mm-hmm. And then I've heard other authors, they sit down and they map out everything. They literally do the framework.
Sure. They know how the book is going to, the beginning, the middle, and the end before they get going.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, the whole 9 yards from, the introduction to, the fun and games part when they start on their journey and, the two low points you generally hit in a book and then, pulling it out all at the end. They know what that's going to be.
Right.
What, in my case, I kind of took the Stephen King approach. I mapped out the first third of the book and it deviated a little bit as I wrote. As an example, I had a news director, female, who was going to be...
I like that, a female news director.
Who was going to be an antagonist to our protagonist.
Okay.
And as I started developing her character, she turned into an ally.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I would imagine the hard part would be writing the dialogue because people speak differently, right? I mean, the news director speaks differently than, I don't know, let's say the guy operating the news truck or the photographer operating the camera. They just have a different way of speaking. So when you're writing the novel, when you're writing the actual dialogue that they're saying, it's got to be difficult to keep that in mind.
The way I approached it, and it worked for me, I don't know if it worked for anybody else, but I think others do this, is, having a large whiteboard in the office. And besides, keeping track of the trajectory of the story, I just went through the internet and I picked out photos of each person in the story.
Oh, okay.
So I could look at a photo and say, yes, that's Joyce,
mm-hmm.
who happened to be the news director. That's Herb, who happened to be the station's operations manager. I had a picture for the general manager. I mean, all the way down the line, our protagonist, his name is Keith. Some of his mentors. I had photos of all of them.
Oh, so that's pretty cool.
I could keep them in character.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest thing is, to remember what it is you've attributed to a character and stay consistent.
Yeah, but then when you looked at the photo, you knew how Keith would answer somebody's question or how he would approach a situation just by looking at him. That's a great idea.
Yes, and having hung around those facilities forever, I kind of knew the lingo of what a photog would sound like,
mm-hmm.
What a producer sounds like, what a director sounds like. In fact, I do have a chapter where we actually, and Leah, I guess you should appreciate this very well. We sit in a control room.
Okay.
And they actually do a newscast.
Oh, yeah.
And unlike yourself, one of the semi-antagonists is this director. It's another female.
Oh, good. Her.
But she's not nice.
All right, yeah. Well, I'm just happy you have a female in there. Good.
Some directors are calm, cool, and collected all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Some are strictly business.
Mm-hmm.
Some are emotional, but they can keep their wilder
mm-hmm.
Expressions in check, and some of them can't do that at all.
What made you decide to write a novel, and did it help that you already published the books to get this one published?
Yes, it definitely helped. The TV on Wheels book was self-published. It was the best financial investment I ever made in my life.
Wow, that's good to hear.
That book was almost $20 a copy.
Wow.
And so you have to buy, at 500 copies, it was like $35, $40 a book. At 3,000 or more, it's down to about $20 a book. We started with $3,000, $60,000.
Wow.
But that, and I'm not advocating people do that. But the thing about that book, it was the first book of its genre. I mean, nobody had really ever did a book on the remote television production.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That's fun to be the first, too.
Yeah, and it was kind of a celebration of the industry. I mean, the second one was more technical. The first one, though, was just the best compliment we got from that book is a guy in the industry. He wrote me an email and he said that, the book is great because my grandmother used to think I drove from town to town and fixed televisions. and I forget what he said that she thought he did now, but he said it was an improvement on traveling
funny.
TV repairman.
Yes. So you write this novel and you get it all complete. Did you hire an editor?
I went through Author House. Let me back all the way back up. The very first book I wrote through McGraw-Hill. They did everything.
Great.
Yeah, except that they keep almost all the money. You want to work for minimum wage? Write a technical book on television.
Yeah.
So they can be quite painful because everybody has a writing style, but McGraw-Hill and the large publishers, it's just like AP. They have their own style guide. They have their own writing guide, and you'd write something and their editors would take it and, put it into their exact style. And often the English might be correct, but it's technically now wrong. Mm-hmm. And so I remember a number of cases going back and forth with them and, trying to negotiate the wording so that, I could keep that information in, but keep it correct. And in a couple cases, I just got rid of a whole paragraph at times because we couldn't come to an agreement. Now,
and even when you told them it was incorrect technically, they just
so they would just say, okay, well then essentially try again.
Wow.
And get it close enough to our style. Where now the second one, when we decided to write that book, I had been writing for a number of years, 10 or 12 years for Broadcast Engineering Magazine, and they liked my style and I liked the style that they used for editing. They were very easy to get along with. And so when it came time to edit that book, since we were doing everything ourselves, I went and hired an editor I was used to working with at Broadcast Engineering Magazine.
Oh, that's great.
And then I hired a graphic artist that also worked for Broadcast Engineering Magazine. So we were like, she knew my writing style. She almost, she had edited enough for me that, often she could correct things, make it much more clearer, and yet keep it technically accurate. The third one, I went the halfway in between route, whereas Author House they'll edit it and they'll lay it out, and then they'll distribute it to all the major bookstores and Amazon and all the other outlets. And then you can buy some add-on services for them for some public relations and marketing.
And did that work for you?
The book has slowly taken off. It's only really been out since a few days before Christmas.
Okay.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. So I missed the Christmas season, but I'm kind of encouraged. I mean, the few reviews and feedback that has come back is positive.
Great.
Great.
So what are you doing to promote breaking news?
With some help from Author House, you've got to have a Facebook presence. Mm-hmm. And also, I'm just reaching out to people I know in the industry, trying to, do the 15 to 30 second elevator pitch, with a hook in the first 5, 6, 7 seconds that, hey, you really want to talk to me because.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. And if you want, we can launch into a story that we have a common friend and colleague.
Okay.
Sure, go
who
ahead.
was the center of the party. So that particular station where this story takes place, and I'm sure you know where it is. I don't know that you want me to use the call letters. I sent them, I haven't done it yet. I'm going to send them a letter saying I was one of the ones that helped pioneer fake news, and I did it in your building.
Oh.
And how did you do that?
So this colleague of ours, he was getting married. And so he was popular at the TV station we all worked at. He loved to do, he still does, because you can tell by what he does today that he loves to do remotes.
Mm-hmm.
He loves to be out in the field. He loves satellite uplinking. He loves anything out in the field.
Right.
And he got his foot in the door at this television station by working at Master Control. And then he branched out from there. He got into, technical maintenance and remotes.
Sure. So Master Control is running the commercials while the TV station is on the air.
Yeah, the fancy name for it now is the industry calls it release. It's where the final point where whatever's going to air or cable or satellite is sent out from.
Mm-hmm.
So he started there. And so a few of us, it started in the engineering department, decided, we should throw him a surprise bachelor party.
Oh.
We decided that where we would have it, so we got to get him there. And this thing just took on a life of its own. He was liked enough in the station that actually the news department got behind it. The photogs got behind it. Obviously, we want to, harass him some in the process.
Sure.
So
a good ribbon.
we arranged for him to have to sit at Master Control that day. And he had an 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock shift. We also got people in place that when the guy that was to replace him at 4 o'clock at Master Control came in the back door, and he gets intercepted by a couple of us, taken to a supervisor's office. We set him down there and say, "You're going to sit there. You're not going to Master Control." So let me back up. About 2 o'clock, we actually start sending out fake radio traffic about a supposedly derailed train. Oh. And the location we put it at just so happens to be directly behind the bar that we're going to hold this at.
Have the surprise party at.
At the surprise party at. And at Master Control, and we made sure that it was close enough, but we turned up the volume. He could hear the two-way traffic over the station. And so what he's hearing is they're rolling one microwave, news truck, then they're rolling another, then they're sending out the KU satellite truck, and they're sending out more photographers. Nobody's actually going there, but you can hear the traffic.
Right.
And so he is just pacing it massively, and he calls the news department and says, "I want to be a part of this. I want to go out on this." And he's told, "Yeah, you can, but as soon as you get replaced at Master Control." So as I said, 4 o'clock is come and gone. There's no replacement. We know where the replacement is.
Oh, no.
He's being held hostage in an office.
So this guy's itching to get out on the story, and he can't go.
Yeah, and I've never seen anybody pace at Master Control like he did. And so finally, about 5:30, we let the guy that was supposed to replace him go out to Master Control. And I kind of followed him out because I knew that, our friend was not going to be a happy camper. He was going to probably, chew his head off. And I was surprised. All our friend said was, "We'll talk later."
Because he wanted to get out.
He just wanted to get to the train derailment.
So now we also realize we got this crazed madman. He wants to get there. He runs downstairs and out the back where we had a truck ready. It was a utility truck. It wasn't a news truck anymore. We made sure he didn't have the keys because he was going to drive 100 miles an hour to get there. But while he's down, we had arranged for a chain of people. And as he ran by towards the back door, we had a bunch of people. We handed them cables that had no ends on them. We handed him a camera that hadn't been powered up in a few years. Oh. We handed him a piece of test equipment that didn't work anymore. And we actually handed him a hose. Now, somebody was going to give him a bucket with a mop, but we thought, no, that's over the top. So he's got all this junk. And he gets in the car, and I drive him over there, and I remember looking at him, and he was staring straight forward. His jaw was set. He was in anticipation. We had two real photographers there, and we did have a news truck parked there, so that when we pulled up to the front of this bar, it looked like it was a sign of a venue, a news story. And one of the photographers, he was only there to record our friend run into the front of this bar, and we told him he had to go all the way to the back of the bar, and there was a door that would get him out to where the train track was. And so he runs through the front. He runs into this back big room full of people, absolutely full of people. And he runs to the back wall, and he's looking for a door. He's looking up and down for a door.
He's just ignoring everybody in the room.
Finally, the laughing got so loud, he finally turned around and realized more than half the station was there, and he was hat.
Aw, that's a lot of planning went
Yeah, I'll
into
say.
that.
Oh, so let me tell you the prologue. A station you're both familiar with extremely well, a couple days later, made inquiries into what the hell had this other station lost its collective mind.
Oh, really?
So obviously they were
Heard.
monitoring our radio traffic,
Ah,
and I guess they
interesting.
actually went out trying to find what we were talking about.
Right.
So at the end, it could have been false, fake
Yeah,
radio
right.
traffic.
Sure.
Could have got our butts in a world of hurt
Right.
from the FCC.
So what kind of advice would you give somebody who's working on a novel, or maybe even a book for a coffee table book?
First thing you got to do is you got to get some framework. Years ago, I started to write a novel, and I just sat down and started writing. And it just, after 20, 35 pages, it just augured into the ground. I mean, it wasn't going anywhere. So my advice is, it's like launching. Remember the old shows where they would launch a rocket up a rail, and then it would free itself from the rail and continue on into space?
Sure.
I think that's the analogy I would use. Is you need a launch rail of some length to keep you
Straight.
vectored in the right way, straight, for long enough so that you can kind of get your sea legs as to the characters and the universe you're building. You're building literally a universe.
Sure.
I think that's the important thing. And then in my case, I kind of enjoyed just now letting the characters develop themselves and speak for themselves.
Well, I really like your idea of having the dry erase board and the photos of everybody so that you can see your character immediately and then have an idea of what they're going to say and how they're going to act. I think that's a great idea for writing a novel.
Right, because, you've got to be, to a certain extent, you got to be stereotypical. If you're not stereotypical, it will take you forever to tell a story and
Sure.
to build a story. So, actually, I have a newsman. His name is Bill. And the picture of him, I can still picture him. He's got this funny hat, a tweed sweater with a sport coat on it, with the old professor style, with the pads on the,
Sure, on the elbows.
arm, on the elbows. And I build him as one of the last real journalists
Okay.
Right.
in the building.
So we all have a picture of that right in our head right now. Sure. We know exactly what you mean. So
And where can our listeners purchase your book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble, you can get it right away.
Okay.
And then what about getting in touch with you if somebody wants to drop you a line or?
Yeah, I'll give you my website. It's www.jimboston.com, myname.com.
JIMBOSTON.com.
My email is sigma, SIGMA, at jimboston.com.
Well, Jim Boston, author of Breaking News, The Story of the Fifth Estate, thanks for joining us on the Author Inside You podcast today.
Matt and Leah, thanks again for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Author Inside You. We are beginning our 3rd year of podcasting.
And if you have any suggestions on an author who you think we should interview, drop us a line. You can find all our contact information at theauthorinside.you.com.
Until next time.
Right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.